Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the June 21st recess meeting of the Arlington County Board. For those joining us online, this is Chair Katie Crystal speaking, joined today by Vice Chair Christian Dorsey, members Takis Karantonis, Matt DeFerenti, and Ms. Libby Garvey. We will begin, as is our custom, with some recognitions and proclamations, including one about which we are very excited as our members of our General Assembly delegation who are out in force, by way of introducing and teeing up Senator Favola for a really important recognition. I just want to say a word of enthusiasm about how glad we are to welcome Pat Carroll back to this boardroom, where she has spent many an hour and so much time with us, doing an incredible job for 14 years representing Arlington's interest, this community's interest in Richmond. And I'll just note, Pat is always such a pleasure to work with because she has great stories about everyone in the General Assembly. But more importantly, everybody in the General Assembly has great stories about Pat Carroll, and specifically how effective she was, how peerless she was in her ability to represent the interests of this community. So she has had big shoes to fill that have been capably navigated by her successor. But Pat, we're so glad to see your face again. So without further ado, Senator Favola, let me welcome you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the County Board, and to all of those who may be viewing. I'm State Senator Barbara Favola. I do represent a large portion of Arlington in the State Senate, but prior to that, I served, like you all are, on the Arlington County Board. So I've known Pat for her 16-year career in Arlington. I've known her when I was on the county board. She was our legislative liaison, and then of course I worked with her when I was I'm still in the State Senate, but for the past 10 years in the State Senate. And I can say that Ms. Carroll has always been very diligent, very responsive, and that's saying something because we have a very challenging delegation, very detail-oriented because we want to do the best job we can do, and she's always been very collaborative. So before I actually present this resolution, I would like to take a moment to call up my colleagues so they can be part of this presentation. Delegate Hope is here, and I know Delegate Sullivan is here. And I believe Senator Howell's aide is here, and you are welcome to come up if you would like, Carol.
Yes, Senator Howell is at a memorial service in Pittsburgh.
Oh, and what an entrance from Lopez.
Oh, and Delegate Lopez has joined us, so it's perfect timing. This is a resolution that passed the Senate. It was in one of those very quick special sessions where because of our rules, we weren't allowed to send anything to the other chamber. But I want you to know that everybody up here is in full support of this resolution. So I'll just take a moment and I'll highlight a couple of paragraphs. And I will say, maybe some of you didn't know this, but Pat Carroll was born on the 4th of July. So just by nature, she has a strong sense of patriotism. She believes strongly in civic engagement, and she really inherited an appreciation of politics from her father, a former editor of the New York Times, the Washington Bureau, and editor and publisher of the Winston-Salem Journal. And I can say without any reservation, Pat was always able to figure out the intersection of politics and policy as she did her job. And she always unfailingly represented Arlington's values, and I think that was very important. Whereas, desirous to be of further service, Pat Carroll advocated for Arlington County at 16 sessions of the General Assembly from 2006 to 2021. With a very proactive and efficient leadership style, she helped develop countless solutions to local challenges over the years and ably represented her community. Whereas Pat Carroll cultivated strong relationships with statewide organizations and with subject matter experts to identify pathways to success and inspired others. She was a great mentor to some of the newer legislative liaisons. She was always confident and courteous and very dedicated to her job. So be it further resolved that the clerk of the Senate prepare a copy of this resolution for presentation to Pat Carroll as an expression of the Senate of Virginia's admiration for her achievements on behalf of the residents of Arlington County. So without further ado, I'd like Pat Carroll to come up. Admire you, Pat. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you for everything. It took a village. And some of you were here when I started.
I was.
Senator Fofola was on the dais at the time. I think the manager, I started in November of 2004. I think the manager had just started, perhaps, in DMF. A year later, okay, so about the same time. And then Adam
We
was
all
here.
grew really good.
But you all, yeah, we all became a team and a partnership with the board and the members of the General Assembly and all the liaisons and all the aides.
And all the
We really
aides,
run
yes,
things.
you,
The aides-
yes.
The aides are the linchpin to all of this. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Pat. We wish you the best in your retirement. Sure,
Sure.
That'd be amazing.
that would be great.
You want to take one?
Do you read it? I can take it and send it around.
Got it.
Do you want to get into this? I don't need to. I can put it in there. I'll get it.
Do you want to, Pat, do you want to?
Okay. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Hold on, wait for me. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Great. Do you want to do a couple with this? Perfect. Yeah, no, yeah, I was thinking that. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, 1, 2. On the count of 3, say Pat. Love it. All right, I'll send these around to everyone.
Did I move that by mistake?
No, I moved it to get it out of the way. You're good. I'll do that later, I guess. Sorry, you're welcome.
As we transition, I'll note that we actually have one other joyful recognition of the contributions of an Arlingtonian who has given so much in a not professional but volunteer capacity, remarkably enough, bringing her professional experience to bear on a really important issue for Arlington's future, which is to say how we will adopt and embrace technology. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Mr. Karantonis to recognize an honored citizen today.
Indeed, Madam Chair, it's really a distinct honor to bid farewell to one of our leading chairs of one of the commissions that have grown so much during her chairwomanship. So, which is also an important part of what she did for us, Mary Cronell. So you, Mary, you elevated information technology to a whole different level, I think, from an issue that we thought at the sides like a tool, like something that, helps us to a really central issue that affects everybody and actually has to guide our thinking as we go forward. You've been an amazing convener and an enabler of conversations. And this is the number one reason why I believe myself and my colleagues are thanking you today. These conversations have advanced community thinking in all things digital and all things technology. You have stabilized the conversation inside the commission and elevated that again through your work for the commission to have a charter. And I think this is a real important asset for the commission going forward. You started, or under your leadership, we've seen this, the data privacy dialogue starting. And we also started a conversation about the critical need for planning the digital layer of this country and for what this means for our future. Whether it is cyber resiliency or it is a pathway to e-governance, or bridging the digital divide, which is a huge part of our equity efforts. Technology is not just a tool anymore. It's a component, it's an essential element, it's a condition of life in our community, and that merits the same attention that all other things like land use and other elements of our central planning thinking merit. So for all this, we are all very thankful for your service. When I started reading Shoshana Zuboff's Age of Surveillance Capitalism, there is a first phrase that is actually reflects. It's a quote from a young girl asking the author, and says, "Are we going to be working for a smart machine, or will we have smart people around this machine?" So thank you so much for having been one of these smart peoples around the machine. So thank you. We have here, before I present you with the certificate of appreciation, a token of appreciation of Arlington County, we have here Jack Belcher, and your partner in good deeds, Jack. So Frank Jazzo, they may want to say a few words for the long years of work.
Thank you, Takis, and thank you all of the board, and thank you, Mark and Jack and DTS for this well-deserved recognition of my friend and colleague, Mary Crennel, and as she goes on to become Dr. Crennel at the University of Southern California, which is not easy for this UCLA lawyer to wish her well, but I will wish her well. Go Bruins. No, but anyhow, maybe a testament to the magnitude of Mary's service to the county was, we were talking, he said, when was it that Mary started serving on Information Technology Advisory Commission? And maybe it's a testament to how many years we've been on this planet, but we did figure out, 2009, so 13 years plus is a long time, and it's been a period of unprecedented technical change, technology change in the county. From the beginning of the Verizon Fios build-out, then the Connect Arlington fiber system and the related dark fiber projects, ITAC and the Tech Commission, now Tech Commission, has been involved. And later, digital equity, making sure broadband is available to all is an important aspect of what we're doing, but also public safety. We've seen next generation 911, E911 come, and we've worked in coordination with other parts of the county in that. And now, obviously, the Amazon headquarters, too, is important. And Mary said she's not going to ask for royalties on her new rebranding of the county as Tech Disneyland. So anyway, Mary, this, like I said, is bittersweet, because I'm going to say farewell to you on the commission, but this is not farewell for good, because I'm sure we will stay in touch. So thank you so much for your service, and thank you all.
Hi, I'm Jack Belcher, CIO in Arlington County, and Mary's been a great supporter of the county government and myself for many, many years. You know, she follows in a long tradition of chairs. Tom Whipple was one, first chair, Dr. Joe Pelton, second, Frank, third. Now we have Mary, and she's created that stability we need. You know, when you look at Arlington, and I try to figure out why I was successful, it's because of the board, and it's because of people like Mary. Mary's counsel, I think you all know this, is sought after nationally and internationally. Yet she comes back and she gives back to the community. And she's done that for 9 years. She's quite a support person for us, and we'll miss her. And we too have a plaque we want to give her as well. Thank you all.
Okay.
So beautiful. Thank you. Oh, that's lovely. Oh, thank you, Jack. That's lovely.
You.
Oh, thank you. All right. Oh, my gosh. Wow. Are we getting all photos here?
Yeah.
Are you getting- Oh, goodness. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I'll stand. All right. All right. Hold. I do have a few things to say. With there being all right.
Go ahead. No, get in there. Jack, go ahead. Who are we missing? Oh, no one. Okay. All right. Awesome. Okay, here we go. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you. It won't be long. Not even a minute for each year of service. How about that? Well, I'm certainly humbled by your kind words, so thank you. It has been an honor to serve, and I want to thank the board because you certainly gave me the opportunity. You approved each time my name came up. And a special thanks to Takis for his support and certainly the digital vision and his willingness to pursue the eGov future. So I'll be watching. In my day job, as Jack mentioned, I work with tech professionals who provide connectivity to refugees in war-torn areas of the world. And it was certainly a breath of fresh air, you know, to focus on the problems of Arlington, because within this 26-mile community I call home, you all really can and could make a profound difference in the lives of citizens who live here. And that was very powerful compared to the problems of the world. And we do have challenges, and they are real, but the ability to solve them is within our grasp. And that was what was so gratifying. And there are many who made my time on the commission really memorable. Thanks to the DTS staff, you know, led by Jack, he moved on me, led by Jack, who consistently asked the question, how can new technology serve the community? And special thanks to Angela Eastwood. She has consistently supported us. She's a joy to work with, and she went above and beyond to support the Tech Commission, so we appreciate her. And thanks to the commissioners I serve with now and those I served with in the past. Those of you might not know, Ken Bell was the person, he was vice chair, he was the person who recruited me. And then Joe Pelton encouraged me to take a leadership role, so I wanted to give them thanks. And then thanks to the commissioners I serve with now. The current Tech Commission is strong, and each one of them really takes their role seriously and strives to create a community that reflects the values of the citizens of Arlington. Not always easy. Democracy is messy, but their intentions are good. And my thanks to Frank. We have served together my entire tenure, and he is steadfast in counsel and understands what is possible given the current climate. And we couldn't have a better person to keep us updated on legislative affairs, so we're really lucky to have him. And then finally, thanks again to Frank and John Burke, who have agreed to serve as leaders of the Tech Commission, if you grant them the opportunity. They certainly make it easier for me to leave, knowing their commitment to Arlington and their knowledge of the issues at hand. And then in closing, I know many have questioned the state of our democracy, particularly what's going on today. But it's the willingness of talented citizens who raise their hands to volunteer to help the community that really does give me hope. So heartfelt thanks to all of you.
well, soon to be Dr. Cornell, that was a really moving note on which to end. I'm going to be thinking of your comments as we do appointments and designations in particular later today. Thank you for all that you've done. Okay, we will move from here into the chairman's report. I'm going to begin with a little bit of positive news, which is that Arlington has earned a really exciting designation. The Walk Friendly Communities Program, which is a nationally recognized program managed by the University of North Carolina's Highway Safety Research Center, has named us a platinum level walk friendly community. So Arlington's been a gold level community for more than a decade, and now with this designation, we join a pretty elite group. There are just 5 platinum level walk-friendly communities around the country. We join New York City, Seattle, Washington, Portland, Oregon, and San Francisco, California. So this is really nice to just have this moment to celebrate our staff, really everyone in our transportation department, and in particular, Arlington Commuter Services and Walk Arlington, which do so much to educate and reach out to the community. In partnering with our transit infrastructure builders. And thank you to all the partners who make this designation possible. This is a great opportunity, too, to recognize just how many of our advisory groups champion walk ability in Arlington, certainly our Transportation Commission and our Pedestrian Advisory Committee, but also the newly named Arlington Neighborhoods Program, NCAC, right, which has teased us up with great projects, including some we voted on just Saturday to make our neighborhoods safer and more enjoyable places for walking. So thank you to the advocates and the commissioners and advisory group members who push and challenge us. Thank you to the staff who are where the rubber-soled shoes meet the road. And thank you to everyone in Arlington for helping us achieve this designation. We're excited to see it. Okay, I have one other item, actually a bit of business to bring before the board, a resolution to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Association's working definition of anti-Semitism. We are joined today by representatives of the American Jewish Committee, who include Alan Ronkin, the executive director, Sue Stolov, and Steve Gell, who is a member of our committee, as well as with the leader, Mr. Ronkin. Thank you so much for joining us. The AJC has done, I think, some very sobering and really important research recently, demonstrating the degree to which incidents of anti-Semitism, even incidents of violent anti-Semitism, are very much on the rise around our country, and that there is a gap in knowledge and understanding about what anti-Semitic incidents and the forms that anti-Semitic hatred may take. One of the things that the American Jewish Committee has met with us as board members, but also other leaders in the Arlington community, in law enforcement and education about, is the importance of being able to, as a community, name what anti-Semitism is in our community and when we see it. One of the ways we can do that is the adoption of the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, which was drafted almost 10 years ago at this point, and has been adopted by communities like ours across the country, and indeed by nations internationally. Importantly, the resolution I'm about to introduce does not create, it's a non-legally binding definition. We know that our human rights ordinance already creates a cause of action for those who have experienced discrimination as a result of religion. But this helps us be able to name what discrimination might look like in our community. It helps Arlington Police Department and our Commonwealth Attorney's Office be able to name when incidents of violence might be motivated by anti-Semitic bias. And in doing so, helps all of us acknowledge the fact that this does exist in our community. It challenges our ability to make this a safe and welcoming community, and is something that we all are benefited from being able to name and move forward on. So I am going to not belabor, but I will read the text of the resolution because I'll ask for a vote on it. I think our clerk may have it to show on the screen, which is as follows. Whereas anti-Semitism, including harassment on the basis of actual or perceived Jewish origin, ancestry, ethnicity, identity, affiliation, or faith, remains a persistent problem globally and in American society. And whereas Jews are a targeted minority for violence and hate in the U.S., have experienced an increase in incidents of hate, and are the most likely religious group to be victimized by such incidents, specifically comprising the targets of 55% of religion-based crimes, according to the 2020 FBI hate crime report, while representing only 2% of the country's population. Whereas recent acts of white supremacist violence and terrorism, such as the murder of 10 Black Americans in Buffalo, New York, motivated by anti-Semitic replacement theory, demonstrate how anti-Semitism is linked to and buttresses other forms of racist hatred. And whereas religion, race, and ethnicity are all protected classes in Arlington's Human Rights Ordinance, representing an existing cause of action for anti-Semitic discrimination. And whereas establishing and creating a definition of anti-Semitism can increase awareness of anti-Semitism in the community, leading to better monitoring, reporting, informed analysis, and investigation of incidents, thus improving public safety and policy making. And whereas the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance adopted a working definition of anti-Semitism in May 2016, which has become the internationally recognized and authoritative definition for use by governments and international organizations. And whereas in the United States, the IHRA working definition is utilized by major government and law enforcement, various government and law enforcement agencies, including the Department of State and Education, in monitoring, training, and education. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Arlington County Board that Arlington County adopts the non-legally binding IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, which is as follows. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, towards Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. And then we further encourage the working definition's use as an educational resource for all county agencies responsible for addressing discrimination in our community. I will move adoption of that resolution, if I may have a second.
You have a second.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Dorsey. I am prepared to call for a vote. I just want to again thank AJC, and if there are any comments, they are welcome as well. Really glad to have the opportunity to do this, and I think we'll also look for opportunities to share more materials and examples of that IHRA working definition as we seek to educate our community. Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to say briefly, obviously I very much support this, and one of the key hopes that I have coming from our adopting this definition is that it not only becomes well-known within county government, but that it also becomes the basis for maybe some instruction in our public schools, and that furthermore, we are able to improve what is one of the systemic issues that we have with hate crimes reporting, and that is people not really knowing what to associate what with what. Sometimes it's obvious, as in the case of race, but even there, we have chronic underreporting issues within law enforcement and other agencies responsible. So I think this will help and will enable us to be able to better track changes in trends, worsening of trends, but clearly, as you established in the preambulatory clauses for this, the evidence of growing hate-based bias against all persons, including Jews and people of Semitic descent, is on the rise, and we very much need to do everything we can to control it. Thank you.
Well put. Thank you so much. Unless there are any further comments, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Mr. Ronkin, thank you again to you, Ms. Stolov, Mr. Gell, and your colleagues. We look forward to working with you in the months to come.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. I don't believe we have any board member appointments. Be able to move forward on appointments for a number of our advisory groups. I will move the following, which I believe does not require a second. I move that to the Commission on the Status of Women, we appoint Kaylee Nichols for a term ending June 30th of 2025. To the Community Development Citizens Advisory Committee, appoint Brian Coleman for a term ending June 30th of 2025. To the Community Services Board, reappoint Robert Carroll, Anne Marie Herman, and Paul Couchbrenner for terms ending June 30th of 2025. To the Disability Advisory Commission, appoint Suzette Riziker for a term ending June 30th of 2024. And to the Historical Affairs and Landmark Review Board, appoint Alexandra Foster for a term ending June 30th of 2026, and reappoint Andrew Winchell Jr. for a term ending May 31st of 2026. Because we are at the mid-year mark, we also are I'm gonna further move to designate some chairs, leaderships of our commission, specifically Anika Quinana as chair of the Arlington Commission for the Arts, her term to end as chair June 30th of 2023. Designate Julia Tanner as chair of the Commission on the Status of Women for a term ending June 30th of 2023. Designate Laura Malakoff as chair of the Community Development Citizens Advisory Committee for a term ending of June 30th of 2023. Designate Wendy Carria as chair of the Community Services Board for a term ending of June 30, 2023. Designate Elisa Ortiz as chair of the Neighborhood Complete Streets Commission for a term ending June 30th of 2023. Designate John Mingus as chair of the Sports Commission for a term ending June 30th of 2023. And designate Chris Wimbush as vice chair of the Tenant Landlord Commission for a term ending January 1st of 2023.
Madam Chair, there was a late addition, which was up on the screen but not on your list, I think, to the it was Mike Dowell. No doubt, no, the other way. There we go. Mike Dowell is chair of the Crystal City Citizen Review Council, but that came late.
Yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
going to further move that we designate Mike Dowell as chair of the Crystal City Citizens Review Council for a term ending June 30th of 2023. Thank you for catching that. I think we are now ready for a vote. All those in favor of these appointments and designations, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Our thanks to those who serve, and as Ms. Crandall said earlier, thank you for standing up for democracy by volunteering in your community. Okay, we don't have board member reports, I don't believe, but we do have, oh, yes, please,
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Dorsey.
One, this came after our board reports roster was set up. I just wanted to note very quickly, our community lost the civil rights pioneer last week on last Thursday when Ronald Deskins, one of the integrators of what was then Stratford Junior High School, passed away after a long illness at the age of 75. We were fortunate to get to know Ron a little bit in 2016. And then again last year with the dedication of panels at now Dorothy Ham Middle School, and we honor his courage as a youngster who integrated Stratford, who endured, and who had an outlook of being able to share those experiences with future generations. And he, in fact, continued his life of sort of being a pioneer integrator, working in the Fairfax County Fire Department to integrate it many years ago, and having retired at the level of captain. So we just commemorate Ron's life and mourn his passing.
Thank you very much for bringing that forward, indeed. All right, we'll turn now to regional reports. Ms. Garvey, I know you've got, I think, some photos to share.
I've got some photos and a bit of a report. It was a long regional, it's a bit of a long regional report because it encompasses about 6 or 7 days, but I will not go over the whole thing. And as colleagues know, Mr. DeFranti joins me as being on the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, and they do a lot of things as part of a delegation, spending a week in Germany learning about various programs to lower carbon emissions and also help adapt to climate change. The trip was funded mostly by the Heinrich Boll Foundation. No taxpayer dollars were spent, and that foundation works on climate change issues. The group included elected officials from our NVRC as well as representatives from Dominion, George Mason University, and a nonprofit that seeks to support energy-saving programs for lower-income people. This sort of exchange and relationship has been going on for over 20 years now. And in fact, as I think we know, if you look out this window, there's a green roof there, and that came about over 20 years ago through this exchange. It was one of the earlier things that we sort of learned from Germany. So next slide, please. We started in Stuttgart, and I've got a couple of pictures of Stuttgart. One of the interesting things is Stuttgart's down in kind of a bowl and surrounded by sort of hills. And years ago, experts studied how the air and winds work around the city, and they started to use corridors, intentional corridors of trees to bring cool air into the city. And they protect those trees and forbid any, they're able to prevent building in the corridors. Next slide, please. You can see maybe a little better. See how the green just kind of threads through. But all of those are, they call it actually the lungs of the city, and is used intentionally to bring good air in. Next slide, please. It was clear listening to our speakers in Stuttgart that we're facing very similar issues, and it's very interesting how they're combating climate change. So one of the first places we visited was a training institute, somewhat like our career center, but it focuses, I think you can go to the next slide, focuses on all ages, from students from high school and older workers wanting to improve their skills in, it's interesting, electric systems, water systems, the internet, any kind of grid. Their focus is on supply grids. And this is how they do the technical training. As again, I said a little bit like our career center. First you learn the theory, then they practice under protected conditions. We got to play a little bit with the electric equipment which they use, and you can see why it's really good to practice under protected conditions first, and then they go out in the real world. And they deliver this, the electricity to the the communities is what they work through. Students, I think next slide. Yeah, students, they learn some theory, as I said, and then they go on. They also work not only with electricity, so this is one of their sort of hands-on, it's inside, they've got like buildings that they actually work on, and they practice getting up on the roof and down, and how to do that. And they also work with internet fiber. Next slide. Yeah, so we watched that. So that little thin thing, they showed us how to prepare the internet fiber if it breaks underground. It was really tricky. They asked us all actually if we wanted to try, and nobody did on that one. It really looked pretty difficult to do. The reason they do this, in part, this is a private company, is because they need workers. Next slide. And it's kind of interesting. You can see how much they've been growing. So there are a variety of different groups that do it. NETS, N-E-T-Z is the group saw, and they're obviously pushing pretty hard to get a lot of workers. They work with, as I say, students, also immigrants, and they're working hard to get a lot of workers out there because just like us, they're having a problem getting the employees that they need. Next slide. The kind of origin of how this all came about is sort of interesting. This company used to provide electricity like Dominion Energy does. It's kind of like a Dominion Energy, but Germany broke up that industry, too much monopoly, and so the company now focuses on distribution. You can kind of see it here. If they compete on the generation, trade, and procure. So they buy the power now and compete with others to get a good price, and then they're part of a regulated grid business, which they do, and they do this distribution. They've got the circle in the middle, and then they also do the grid-related services. So they're kind of a quasi-public, quasi-private company. They're funded 50% by taxes, 30% grid fee, and 20% for the energy they carry. They work for the communities, so it would be like we had our own Arlington Electric Company, our own distribution company, which is kind of cool. We also went about and visited a number of towns in the Stuttgart area, which we saw some other things, which I'm not going to go over here. Net zero apartment buildings that produce all their own electricity. We saw a flood control project that is being built to the 10,000-year flood level and more. It's pretty fascinating what they do. One of the things I noted, and we'll go on next to, we're going to get to Hamburg, in a minute, but I will mention one more thing about Stuttgart that I learned there. So they're in a region called the Verband region, and Stuttgart is the center of it. It's part of a network. They're now part of a network with about 25 regions throughout Europe that have formed a coalition to work with each other on issues and support each other. They meet regularly. It's kind of a bit, I think, the way as if COG was representing this region and met with Greater Atlanta and New York City and Chicago, San Francisco. So you've got these major urban areas and regions that are finding they have very similar problems, and they find they can help each other, and they've just sort of started setting that up. But it's really interesting and something to consider as some of our federal efforts, particularly in climate control, may get weaker and weaker, that we might be able to support each other in that work. So then we went to Hamburg. And Hamburg is a large city, as you can see here, and next slide, that has major flooding issues. And they're on the Elbe, Neckar River, and I think the Elbe. I think they both come together in Hamburg. And the flooding issues have gotten a lot worse with global warming. This is a very old area of town that's pretty cool. And the next slide, please. They are doing some pretty incredible engineering to cope with this. This is some of the engineering, which I'm not expecting to really be able to read it, but it just shows that they're working on how to flood-proof older buildings and to construct newer buildings. And if you can go to the next one. So here you see some of those older buildings that were underwater, the area that was underwater, and this bridge, which is a pedestrian walkway. What they've done is they've engineered the lower part of the buildings to withstand the water, and they have put in a whole network of pedestrian ways and actually routes for emergency vehicles in case of a flood. And when it floods, everybody just starts working up on these higher levels, and the city continues to work, which is pretty fascinating. These buildings were originally built in the 1880s, and it's just amazing to see how they do it. And they're required to be able to exit the buildings from an upper floor, so that when it floods, nobody gets caught down in the lower floors, and they have ways to get out and move around. Next slide. Another interesting thing they have a floating park. It's made out of concrete, and it floats. And you can see it a little bit here in the windows. It's reflected, and in the window of this restaurant. And in these windows, actually withstand flooding too. And they withstand the water. This is a restaurant, and those windows withstand flooding kind of, I think, like an aquarium. And that's all good with the water, but they realized in a major storm, because they're not that far from the Atlantic Ocean, you can get things like huge trees and things that act as battering rams and would break the windows, even though they can withstand the water. So they've devised a protection against such breakage. And you can see these ropes, see the ropes coming down, and the grates at the bottom. That's part of the system. And the next slide, please. When the water rises, those grates flip up. You can see the hinge, and a protective barrier floats up. The ropes keep it in place in front of the windows, and the barrier floats up as high as the water gets. It can get really high or not, and when the water goes down, the barrier goes down, and it's all just kind of in place. So they get big floods, it's not a problem, which is kind of fascinating. German engineering. Next slide. They're also working on microtransit. They have got a pilot with Volkswagen, and I know that our staff are working on microtransit here. Next slide, I think. Yeah, this is the inside. We wrote in these. It's one of our colleagues from George Mason, and you can see it's got a driver. It's not driverless. And one more slide. It's really nice and comfortable inside. This is a Volkswagen Pilot, and they are working on making it so if you live in a suburb somewhere, you can call and say you want to ride. This vehicle will come and get you and pick up. Others may be on the way. But it's pretty fascinating, and I thought it'd be really good for our staff to kind of follow this pilot and find out what they're doing, because we're thinking of doing the same thing. And maybe somebody could even reach out to Volkswagen and see if they want to do a pilot in this country, maybe here, which might not be a bad idea. And next slide. Like Stuttgart, Hamburg's really intentional about its green space. See that ribbon all the way around? They've got two kind of rings. Gruner ring means just green ring, that they've got all the way around the city. This is on the floor of their environmental protection agency that we went into. We learned a lot about their stormwater planning. Next slide. Yep. So this is more of like the stormwater that we face, not the big river flooding. And they're also working a lot on that. The first part of our sessions kind of described the people working on this Ihra program, which is their stormwater planning. They described their problem, and it was interesting. They're kind of acting as if this is like a surprise to you. Temperatures are going up, but we have these extreme rain events. It was all just exactly what we have here, except their temperature's rising. They're concerned about getting into the 80s and 90s, but of course, we're concerned about getting in the 90s and the 100s. It's all relative. 2020 was the first year that they went an entire year without a single day below freezing. That was the first time ever. No day below freezing the entire year. So they have worries about the stormwater system in the not only the big rain events, but then drought. Sometimes they have drought. So particularly in spring, which is when that's getting worse, less water in the spring when they need water for crops. So they're stormwater planning a little differently, I think, from ours, but it's interesting. Focuses one on heat and drought management, and then like we do on flood risk mitigation, and then also conservation of water so that they can keep the water for use on crops and things when they have the drought, the drier times. They also work on using water to create temperature differences. And I don't think, I'm so sorry I don't have more pictures to move on after this one, but they have temperature differences. So when it gets hot in one part of the city, that's the sponge city concept. When it gets hot and you've got water going, that creates, the water evaporates, it gets cooler, and that sets up a breeze because the air moves in. And actually, they intentionally try to place water in different areas to cool the air and to get a breeze going through the city. So they're also very intentional, kind of creating a microclimate. They're doing a lot with green roofs. They've gotten far beyond what we have out here, requiring them on all their new buildings. They're doing a lot of retrofitting. It turns out that solar panels are more efficient over a green roof. I didn't know this, but apparently they are. So they're really working on green roofs, not only for cooling and for generating electricity, but also for biodiversity, because they are intentionally providing habitat for insects as well and do research on the insects that can thrive there. Next slide. We also visited a neighborhood around Hamburg that has a real problem with this stormwater flooding, very similar to what we do. And what they did, sort of similar to what we're doing is it Cardinal Elementary? I forget the name of the elementary school. No, where you've got a cistern under a field. So you can see to the left the 500-liter tank that's underneath. They just come, and then you can see the fields on the right. The first, the title is off. It's when it's raining. The regular storm system works. Then when it's a heavy rain, Starkregen, which is strong rain, then the cistern will start to fill up. And when you have an extreme event, 500-year event or whatever, the cistern fills up and then the whole field fills up and becomes a huge pond that eventually drains. And the next slide, you can see, and here we all are. That is the group with a couple of our lecturers at the time. This is the field we walked on as artificial turf. It's great. And you can kind of see it's a big bowl. And so underneath that is the 500,000, I think that's what it said, liter tank. And then that whole field can fill up as well, which is pretty cool. So I think there's some things that we could really continue to learn from, particularly in Hamburg. I was really struck by the similarities and how they work. I think the trips are really valuable. I continue to learn a lot. I also think we might benefit from some staff exchanges, perhaps, on some of the work that they're doing, either virtually or real. The Heinrich Boll Foundation does fund trips for staff as well as elected officials, so it might be worth exploring, and I know the NVRC would be interested in doing that. I think there's a lot that we still have to learn from each other, and we're all facing some pretty tough issues, and the more help we've got, the better. And it was a real privilege to go, so thank you for letting me take this few weeks away, which ended up obviously extending another week. I appreciate all the understanding. And then I have one more report, if that's all right, Madam Chair. I also, again, representing the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, this time part of our military and community defense communities program that they do. And this, the Northern Virginia Regional Commission received a Great American Defense Community Designation Award, and that was for the work actually that the NVRC has been doing, particularly in the Ihra area, of equity and race relations. We've been doing a lot of work on that, and it was nice to go. I got to, and the next slide, please. I got to go and literally show the flag. This is the flag. It was presented to NVRC, and it's going to all the different bases and being shown, but then we just fold it up and take it away again. So those are our staff there from the NVRC, and I got to make some remarks. And we're only the second community in Virginia to receive this award, which is pretty cool. And I had a good time finally meeting our new commander on the base and enjoyed talking to him quite a bit. So we're doing a lot of regional work, and I think it's really good work, and it's nice to see it kind of all paying off and getting recognized. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellent. Thank you very much, Ms. Garvey. Okay, over at the Transportation Planning Board, big decisions afoot regarding the 2040 goals. Mr. Carantonis, would you like to give us an update? 2045.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm absolutely certain that most of you have served in these bodies before, are very much aware of the travails to the decisions that the Transportation Planning Board, the Metropolitan Washington Council of Government, Transportation Planning Board has taken on Visualize 2045, as you can see there, which is a long-range transportation plan for the National Capital Region. Next slide, please. So for the benefit of everybody who's maybe watching or will be watching, Visualize 2045 is a long-range transportation plan for the Metropolitan Washington, as we said already, and it's helping decision makers and residents to visualize the region's future. It's a plan, and the update of which is mandated by the federal government every 4 years. And the update shows how the National Capital Region's transportation system will provide a wide range of transportation options to our growing region and population, pretty much as you've seen in Stuttgart when they started there with their new rail infrastructure. The plan update is a result of collaborating regional transportation agencies, so our staff is participating in that, but they are connected through the Transportation Planning Board, which is the established metropolitan planning organization that completes and submits the final plan to the federal government. Next slide, please. So what this is about, first, I mean, in 6 points. So expanding the diversity choices for all travelers. This is something that we talk also very often when we talk about our transportation options. Maximizing travel safety and efficiency while taking into account emerging technologies, like, for example, the Volkswagen and the automated vehicles and electrification that is coming. Protecting the environment and mitigating climate change, not very unlike the city of Hamburg is thinking about that. Ensuring that our infrastructure is adequate, it's resilient and financially supported. Dollars play a very big role in this, and part of Visualize 2045 is about also thinking about what the future investments need to be and how they have to be structured in order to achieve our goals. The plan is going to be about how we support economic development through transportation choices and how we're making travel across the region equitable, which is a very big focus of the Council of Governments and a key element of whether this planning will be successful in serving all residents of the area or only a few. So it's about, in short, it's about shorter, safer, lower cost trips and better connectivity overall. Next slide, please. So here are the priorities in a very nicely done infographic that I found really very, concise. The 3 C's are very, visible: concentrate, circulate, and connect. Concentrate the land use activity in centers where housing and jobs and transit are close to each other. So this means bring jobs and housing closer together, increase the telecommuting and other options of commuting, and improve walk and bike access to transit, which brings us over to circulate, which is the multimodal connectivity and mobility, expanding public transit, which is a key element, and it's for a reason that's in the middle of these choices here. Complete the National Capital Trail Network, which was a very big theme in the last few years, and I believe that the region is moving towards that, and that's a good thing. And finally, connect, move more people on Metrolate and generally on transit. And the last one is expand the express highway network, about which there will always be a little conversation between the inner jurisdictions and the outer jurisdictions. Next. So at the same time, the Transportation Planning Board adopted on its June meeting the following emission reduction goals. And I should preface that as well by saying that when the Planning Board adopted the Visualize 2045, it added a clause in the final resolution that points to these emission reduction goals. So these are very, 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 very ambitious goals. By 2030, 50% reduction in on-road greenhouse gas emissions from the 2005 level, that's the baseline, and by 2050, 80%. So these goals are considered quote-unquote aspirational and are in fact voluntary. There was quite a lot of conversation about that. We stood on the side of those who supported a more attainable goal, with not only with the measures and policies we have today in place, but also with a significant effort above them. And so we supported the 32%, and our colleagues in Fairfax, for example, did the same, et cetera. We tried very hard. But especially the jurisdictions across the river on the Maryland and DC side insisted on a completely ambitious 50% reduction goal. How difficult this is, I invite everybody to revisit the 2021 Transportation Board Climate Mitigation Study, which we presented here last February, and it's available, and I will show later where. Next slide. So, there are strategies associated with these goals. There is agreement about the following. Agreement means trans-regional agreement. Almost all local governments have committed to follow these, to implement this first 7. So improve walk-bike access to all high-capacity transit hubs. Complete the National Capital Trade Network by 2030, as I mentioned. Convert public sector vehicles, all of them, including transit, to clean fuels. And I put it in here in this slide in italic because it's not 100%. This doesn't mean always electric. So there are alternate fuels like we've discussed here with, with fuel cells and hydrogen, etc. Deploy a region-wide robust EV charging network. Then comes additional housing near transit stations and hub. Reduce bus travel times and implement transportation system management and operations improvement measures. These are the 7 strategies that are off the bat. They are, there is wide agreement that this needs to be implemented. The next slide, please. Now there are emission reduction strategies that the board is working with the transportation with the staff of COG to be explored. So there is not strong unanimity about how and what and when these strategies could be implemented. First of all, there is a shift of growth, so growth planning in jobs and housing from currently forecasted locations that can be, in some place in Loudoun, et cetera, to identified high-capacity transit locations. So to make these choices more efficient and more transit-oriented. Second, make bus and rail transit fare-free by 2030. Third, to price workplace parking for all employees in activity centers first by 2030 and then region-wide by 2050. So no free destination parking at the job place by 2050, universally by 2030 in activity centers. Increase support for telework replacing trips. Charge an additional fee. This is an interesting proposition. Charge an additional fee per vehicle mile traveled in motorized private passenger vehicle travel. So that means there will be an additional tax on those who choose to drive in their private vehicles as opposed to choose to have the same trip in public transit or in a different model. Introduce a cordon fee or a commuter tax per trip for all vehicles entering activity centers in the core of the District of Columbia. So these are the 6 strategies that are explored, or where the jurisdictions, our fellow jurisdictions or neighboring jurisdictions signal that they are, willing to discuss. Next slide, please. So these are the 2 URLs where more information can be downloaded. The visualize2045.org website is amazingly is an amazing resource for everybody who is interested in the future growth of a region. And as always, I'm ending these slideshows, but the slide decks with showing the temperature that is getting hotter and hotter by 2021. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's a sobering note on which to end. I appreciate the update. I'll just note, regarding some of those strategies, we have had some really interesting conversations with our colleagues around Northern Virginia about the fare-free transit proposal. One of the biggest impediments to doing it is that for some of our systems, as much as 40% of our fares actually come from federal commuter benefits. So going fare-free means we're basically leaving federal dollars on the table. I wonder if we, as a region, it's worth even broaching, if we were to do it in partnership with the district in Maryland, could initiate that conversation with perhaps OPM about whether there's an interest in contributing to those systems differently than the commuter benefits program. If we were to go fare-free, that's the only hesitation I have about what is otherwise, I think, a very trendy and very exciting idea about fare-free transit service.
Yeah, I agree. The issue is that there's so much investment. We're so much behind investment in the entire system. And if we even want to achieve a fraction of what is listed there, a lot more probably federal, state, and other money needs to be flow into that. It's not the least of the preoccupations how much of a compensation for fare box recovery we will have. I mean, this is not the least, but this is just a part of a very big future budget that needs to be seriously approached. And those who have been riding at the bleeding edge of saying 50% reduction, this means +% reduction every year in average, running in the last 9 years towards 2030. They will need to step up and say, yes, this is the kind of compensation from the federal government that we will be ready to ask for.
Yeah, well put. Thank you, Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Carantonis. Having been around when Visualize 2045 was developed, it's always interesting to see how the conversations around the updates are coming along. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about the discussion between the more attainable but perhaps less aspirational targets. You know, we are used to reaching for the stars in Arlington and creating aspirational plans, but I would say typically those plans have some path that we could at least see towards achieving it. And in this case, my recollection of the climate mitigation study shows that the reduction levels of 50% by 30 and 80% by 50 are, I won't say impossible, but not at all likely. Is that a fair recollection of what that study determined? And then I think the follow-up question is, was there any concern about not getting the best effort from jurisdictions if there is a similar feeling that these goals are so aspirational as to not be realistic, and therefore we don't really see any productive progress?
Yes, these are. I share both concerns. So there was an additional problem that we need to address here, that some of our outer Northern Virginia jurisdictions abstained from the vote at the end, which is not very helpful in a sense that it creates a disconnect between, I consider it still a false dichotomy or a false conflict between inner and outer. Yes, we have different interests and different pressing priorities, but they are completely compatible if we sit down and plan together. We can be complementary to each other, and we can, because it's in our interest and in their interest to achieve attainable goals. Now, there was a narrative among jurisdictions like Prince William's County, like Loudoun, to shoot for a very modest, almost a business as usual goal of 23% over 2005, for which policies are already in the books today and they're already implemented. So there was zero, extra effort put into perspective here. We in Fairfax, we talked a lot about that, and we said we will support something that the studies support as attainable with some extra effort. So it's already aspirational or ambitious, if you want, but the effort is within the parameters that we can actually be accountable to implement. 50% is really above that, way above that. And it was, there was a division between the two parts of the river here. So looking ahead, we have to work to get people back into one fold and at least achieve the maximum part of this goal we can achieve. That's the situation after this decision. We will continue to work on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Garvey?
Yeah, I just want to mention, I was at the VRE meeting on Friday. They talked to the VRE is going to do a pilot for free fares when the metro is shutting down south of the airport, I think it is. Yeah. Anyway, they're going to be doing that for, it's either a week to 6 weeks. I was looking back. I did not write it down in my notes. But, and we're going to be taking, we talked about it actually a fair amount, getting some good information about who's riding and why. And so I think that will help sort of move along this whole discussion of free fares, lower fares, or what do we do? So it's kind of, we're actually all kind of excited about them, giving this a try. So
that's great, especially since I know historically the ridership has tended to trend a little wealthier, a lot wider in the region. So that'll be really exciting.
So
we'll
see what happens. Yeah, I'm fascinated by it. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, some good discussion there. Thank you all. Okay, I believe that is it for regional reports. So without further ado, I will turn it over to the manager for an update on COVID.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, before I get to that, I wanted to follow up with a question that was raised last month in public comment. A resident came and asked about our organics collection. And he came forward with some concerns about the mishandling of his organics cart during curbside collection, and said that he had witnessed our contractor, which is American Disposal Services, or ADS, combining organics with the regular trash. So went back and did a little research on this. First, I wanted to emphasize that we take these allegations seriously, as any mixing is not only prohibited by the county code, but just would undermine confidence in the program. We are aware of, the Solid Waste Bureau is aware of some of the complaints, and staff have assured me there is no systemic widespread problems with contractors mixing organics. So to prevent and discourage this behavior, ADS has training for all its crew members, and they are required to sign a certification that they will adhere to our standards. And we're the only jurisdiction who requires that signing of such a statement. There's also a zero tolerance policy for mixing materials, and violation is subject to an automatic 1 week suspension without pay. And this was recently increased from a 1-day suspension to increase the deterrent. When we do get complaints, those are immediately referred for investigation. And to aid these investigations, all collection vehicles have video cameras to monitor crews. The video is limited, however, to 150 hours of storage, so it's important that if residents see something, they report it immediately. That will increase the likelihood that we'll be able to identify and investigate the specific allegations and find out if there had been a violation. So to help us, we're going to ask residents who see a violation to come to the county's Report a Problem app by selecting missed services, missed collection, entering comments and details. If they can, the date, the exact location, the truck number are all very helpful. And finally, I did want to take a moment to recognize, and I didn't know this, that last week was Solid Waste and Recycling Workers Week. So it's a good reminder of the incredibly important work and pretty thankless work that the hardworking crews do for county residents. So a big thank you goes out to them and our staff that work with them over the last few years, which have been difficult. So I wanted to give you that update.
And Mr. Manager, thank you for that update. Has staff closed the loop with Mr. Messenger about who came to speak with us?
I do not know, but I will follow up and make sure they do.
Great. That is a very fulsome response. I would hope a resident who came forward with those concerns would find it satisfactory.
Okay, so my next item is my monthly update. I'm looking forward to when I don't have to do these, but on COVID, give you a few updates on cases. Since we spoke last month, Northern Virginia, including Arlington, has started to see a drop in cases. So we had a peak, a little bit of a peak in late May. The positivity rate is hovering around 13%. And Arlington, much like our neighbors, we're in the medium COVID-19 community level that's designated by CDC. And fortunately, we're not seeing an increase. As a matter of fact, I just saw the reports today, we're seeing a drop in hospitalizations. On testing, we continue to offer no-cost testing at 5 curative kiosks, and everyone can go order their free at-home tests at covid.gov/tests. And we had about 3,000 tests administered last week at the curative locations. For vaccines and boosters, we're close to 89% of people 5 years and older having received at least 1 dose, and close to 80% being fully vaccinated. So now the big news of the day, starting tomorrow, June 22nd, Arlington County will begin offering both the Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines to children as young as 6 months. These will be offered 3 days a week, and here, pay attention, by appointment only. So, and that's going to be at our location, I think I mentioned this previously, at 2100 Washington Boulevard, our public health immunization clinic in Sequoia Plaza. And the Pfizer is a 3-dose vaccine for children from age 6 months through 4 years, and Moderna is a 2-dose vaccine for children ages 6 months through 5 years. And so the hours at the clinic, so people know, are Wednesday and Friday, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and on Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And encourage people to go to our county website where all these details are located. And there's information right there. You can schedule an appointment right there online. If people don't want to go online and they need some help with accommodations, again, we have our phone line available, 703-228-7999, and people should call that for any kind of assistance that they need. And then for older children, teenagers, and adults, we continue to have walk-in and appointments at Arlington Mill and Walter Reed. And at Arlington Mill, the clinic hours are up on our website. And there, again, that's going to be on Tuesday and through Friday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturdays 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And at Walter Reed, we have a new schedule, and it's going to be open on 2 days, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And just a reminder, because it may have people hear a lot of this, we're not going to be providing the baby vax or the vaccines for children under 5 at Walter Reed or Arlington Mill. You have to come to Sequoia and make an appointment. So that concludes my presentation, and happy to take any questions.
Madam Chair?
Yes, please, Ms. Garvey.
No question. I just want to thank the manager for the very extensive Saturday hours to make it easier for people to come in and bring their small children. I think that's just great. Thank you.
Without a doubt. Absolutely. We're excited to see this milestone. Some of us very excited to see this milestone. All right, Mr. Manager, I believe that concludes your report. Thank you so much. So our next item of business is to move into a closed session, and I will make the following motion, which is that the county board convene a closed meeting as authorized by Virginia Code sections 2.2, 3711A3 for 2 discussions regarding the acquisition and disposition of real property for public purpose, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body. All right, that's been seconded by Mr. DeFerranti. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. We are in closed session. We will return when we are concluded. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. The board is now back in open session. I'm going to make a motion to certify, which is as follows. I move that the members of the county board certify at the just concluded closed session. First, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under Chapter 37, Title 2.2 of the Code of Virginia. And two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened, were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. It's been seconded by Mr. Dorsey. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Madam Clerk, do we have any more business to come before the board?
We do not.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. Let's do a roll call vote. I will turn it to our clerk to do so.
Ms. Crystal?
Aye.
Mr. Dorsey?
Yes.
Ms. Garvey? Yes. Excuse me, Mr. DeFerranti? Yes. Mr. Carantonis?
Yes.
Thank you for keeping me on that. All right, we will be back on Tuesday, June 28th at 3 p.m. for the CIP work session on stormwater as well as utilities, technology, and public safety, followed by the CIP public hearing at 7 p.m. on the 28th. We look forward to seeing everyone then. We're adjourned.